Breaking news right now, Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard is about to speak live about the two Atlanta police officers fired for using excessive force against two college students. We are going to take it live as soon as he starts speaking. He's been reviewing the possibility of charges. And he's about to step up to the microphone. Let me tell you a little bit more about the case. It happened Saturday night in Atlanta. It was about 10 o'clock in the evening when these two college students, as they tell it, were out to get dinner and got caught up in all the traffic from the protest and from the curfew. So it was about an hour after the curfew started. And at one point, the young woman said she thought she was going to be killed. She thought she was going to die right there. Police tased them. She was yanked out of the vehicle. Also, police on the other side, on the driver's side, actually used the butt of a gun to break the window, shattering the glass. The young man who was in the car suffered a fractured arm and about 20 stitches. So again, I want to tell you what you're looking at right here. This was a press conference scheduled for 11 o'clock today. The Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard is set to speak. And it looks like they're just kind of getting the technical part of this all set up, adjusting the video monitor right there. We're waiting to hear what he has to say. As you know by now, you've probably seen the video. Atlanta's Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, in consultation with the police chief, Erica Shields, reviewed all the body camera video from the officers involved and decided within 24 hours of the actual incident to fire the two APD officers and put 3 more on desk duty for now. The district attorney, Paul Howard, has been reviewing the case in consultation with the Atlanta police chief, also talking to the students and the families.
First of all, I want to
here we go,
thank you
DA
all for
Paul
being
Howard
here today. We are here under different circumstances because of the virus, and quite honestly, when we called the press conference, we forgot that we were still operating under a virus. So I am going to start to speak, and as I speak, I'm going to remove my mask, so to let you know that. It also presents some time constraints for us because this room is so small that I am going to try to make our presentation taking those time restraints in mind. Also, in the rear of the room, the 2 college students that were involved in this incident are here, and after we make our presentation, I'm going to ask them to come forward so that you might get a chance to see them and ask any questions that you might have. Also standing here with me is the Public Integrity Unit members, and if you guys would just raise your hands so that people will know you are the unit that was involved in the investigation of this matter. And standing to the right of the Mondo board is the head of that unit, who is Salita Griffin. I agree with Mayor Bottoms, and I agree with our police chief, Erica Shields, when they both have conveyed in so many separate ways that the conduct involved in this incident, it is not indicative of the way that we treat people in the city of Atlanta. And it certainly isn't indicative of the way that we treat our children. And in this case, this incident involved 2 children. And I'm sure many people might have the question, why today? You know, why are we doing this today? And I want to tell you, one of the reasons that we're doing this today, and one of the reasons that you'll see from our presentation, is because the information is before us. The information that allows us to draw conclusions regarding probable cause, that information is available to us. And that is a lot different from many of the cases that our office handles through our PIU unit, because in many of those cases, there is no body cam information. There is no dash cam videotapes. We don't have witnesses because in those cases, generally, our witnesses are already deceased. And that means that the remaining witnesses are often just police officers. And in many of our cases, in fact, in most of our cases, the police officers refuse to accept interviews with the DA's office. But in this case, it's different because the information is here. And as I say to my fellow prosecutors across the country, if the information is available, people in the communities ask, well, why can't you move forward? And that's what we are attempting to do today. If you'll start. So this incident occurred on the 30th of May of 2020, and it occurred between 9:30 p.m. and 9:49 p.m. And at the end of the presentation, if it is okay with our two victims that are here, we're going to play a portion of the tape so that will indicate the time period that we're talking about in this presentation. So the people involved are three: Chancellor Myers,
Looks like we just lost the live feed. Let's stick with it for another second and see if it comes back. District Attorney Paul Howard was just about to kind of take us through the timeline and show some of the tape that they've been able to pull together from the body camera of the two Atlanta police officers who were fired after an incident of what looks like excessive force, where two college students were stuck in traffic, confronted, one of them badly injured. The other said she was so scared she thought she was going to die. They were both tased and detained, one overnight, one detained just briefly, never told why they were detained at that point. Apparently we don't have this District Attorney Paul Howard live feed happening right now, so let's see what we are able to do. Are we going to be able to get it back, or should we take us back? I think what we're going to do is return to regular programming. We'll take you back to The View. If we are unable to bring it up, again, technology sometimes freezes like that. It happens to you, it happens to us too. We'll have a complete report on Channel 2 Action News at noon. For now, we take you back to The View.
Way to reopen the economy in phases smartly. Now, what's the key to reopening the economy? You have BMW here in South Carolina. They're closed now. What I would like to see is manufacturers like BMW have the testing ability to call their employees back, test them all, the ones that are positive, treat them, send them home, make sure they're okay, and the rest of everybody else can go back to work. But the key to getting people back into the economy is testing. And as fighting the virus, what we've done is social distancing and mitigation has saved well over 1 million lives. I'm convinced of that. But
by the police department.
And now we're back. Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard speaking about the two Atlanta police officers. We're waiting to hear if there are any criminal charges.
As you might have already observed from the video, he was the driver of the vehicle. And what he attempted to do at the very beginning of the incident was to motion to a friend and to ask him to get into the vehicle. And that young man was Chancellor Myers. And you can hear in the videotape, Mr. Young is asking the police to simply let Mr. Myers get into his car. And at the time, Mr. Myers was being thrown to the ground, and you can hear Mr. Myers crying. And Mr. Young is still asking, could you just let him get in my car? Well, one of the things that we have been able to conclude from the video is that you can actually hear the police tell or say to Mr. Young, go or go to jail. That was what they said to him, was to go or go to jail. And when they said go or go to jail, he then left and he proceeded down the street. But shortly after that, the police caught up with him. They then attempted to force his door open. You can see one of the policemen with an object, a baton, attempt to break into the window, and he struck the window several times. And finally, one of the officers used a device to break the window. And after that happened, Mr. Young was tased by the police. You can see Mr. Young attempting to protect Mrs. Pilgrim, to shield her with his own body while he is being tased as well. The policeman One of the policemen was able to then pull Mr. Young out of the car onto the pavement, and when he was pulled on the pavement, it looks like much of the force landed on his left arm, and he has now suffered a fracture of his wrists, a very large gash in his left arm, and in fact he has received 24 stitches from the injuries that he received from being pulled from the car and thrown to the paved street. After he was pulled out of the car, then he was tased again after he was pulled out. I'm sure that I can see that. He was zip tied, and he was then escorted to the CNN Center. And in an interview with Mr. Young, he also revealed to us that the officer who escorted him to the CNN Center stood in a position to his rear and punched him more than 10 times in the back as he was being escorted from the CNN Center to the location where he was then taken to Grady Hospital. If you go to the next one. So he waited at the center for about 2.5 hours. He was taken to Grady Hospital, and I believe he remained at Grady until about 7 the next morning. He was then taken to the City of Atlanta Detention Center. Sometime around 10 a.m., he was then brought to municipal court, and he was then informed by the judge for the first time that he was being charged with attempting to elude these officers. And Mr. Young, in his statement, indicated that he was somewhat amazed. He thought that maybe they had gotten him mixed up with somebody else. But shortly after that, he was given a signature bond, and shortly after the signature bond, his charges were dismissed, I believe upon instruction of our mayor, Keisha Bottoms, and Mayor Bottoms has since issued an apology to Mr. Young, Ms. Pilgrim, and their families. So also this case, as we reviewed the evidence, we were able to note some other important considerations, and one of those considerations that kind of gives you a flavor of what was going on in this event. We received a statement from one of the officers who said that he was standing at the rear of the vehicle being driven by Mr. Young, and he saw that the car was placed in reverse and the vehicle tried to come back and hit him, and one of the other officers had to pull him out of the way so that it would save his life. And some of you have gotten a chance to watch the video. We're going to show it again today. And as you can see, while Mr. Young was in the car, he spent most of his time trying to repel the tasers that had been shot into his body. And you cannot see an instance where any attempt was made to run over an officer from the rear. One of the other things that we noted is while the incident took place, there was no mention of a firearm at all. There was no mention of a firearm. But after the incident, when the officers were walking away and returning to their original stations, on the tape, you can hear one of the officers say, "They pulled a gun on us." And when you examine the tape, there is no indication that, that any mention was made of a firearm. And in fact, after the incident, no firearm was ever located on the persons of the two parties, and no firearm was ever located in the vehicle. If you go to the next one. So how did we go about making the charging decision? First of all, I want to tell you that we've had outstanding cooperation from the Atlanta Police Department. The body cam videos that we were able to review, the police reports, were sent to us by the Atlanta Police Department, and we have been in constant communication with them. We had an opportunity to interview both of the victims, and we just noted some of our findings about the victims. They were both extremely innocent. In fact, my investigators concluded that they were so innocent, almost to the point of being naive. They were factual, extremely factual in their descriptions of what had happened, and their stories corroborated each other. We also, and I think we just noted that, you know, in my experience as DA talking to victims, we noted that these were really two of the nicest people that we had ever gotten a chance to meet in the DA's office. So we reviewed 7 different body-worn cameras, and we also looked at 1 media clip. We reviewed the physical evidence, the car, the bodily injuries to the victims, which were consistent with what they had described. And we also reviewed statements made, these were criminal statements, made by the police officers. And so we were then at the point that we could make a charging decision. So based upon our consideration of the facts, we have on this morning presented to one of our Superior Court judges 6 arrest warrants for these 6 officers. These are all Atlanta officers, and I'm sure you recognize that 2 of these officers have already been terminated by the Atlanta Police Department. And what we've done is to just in a shorthand method describe the charges against those officers. Lonnie Hood, who's charged with aggravated assault of Messiah Young for the use of the taser, the aggravated assault of Tanaya Pilgrim, also for the use of the taser, and also a simple battery for pulling Ms. Pilgrim out of the car onto the paved street. The second officer is Willie Sauls, and charged with aggravated assault of Ms. Pilgrim, and this is for pointing a taser at Mrs. Pilgrim. And as many of you all know, under Georgia law, a taser is considered as a deadly weapon under Georgia law. And also criminal damage to property for the damage and the striking of the window of Miss Pilgrim's car. The third officer, Officer Ivory Streeter, he was one of the officers that was terminated by Chief Shields and Mayor Bottoms, charged with aggravated assault for the use of the taser with respect to Ms. Pilgrim. And also he is charged with a misdemeanor for pointing a gun, a handgun, at Messiah Young. All right. If you go to the next one. The other 3 officers, Mark Gardner is one of the officers who was dismissed by the city, and the arrest warrant that we have asked the court to issue against him charges him with aggravated assault of Ms. Pilgrim for the use of the taser. The 5th officer is Armand Jones, who is charged with aggravated battery of Messiah Young, and that is for the forcible removal of him and placing him on the paved street. And the second charge against him is for pointing a gun at Messiah Young. And the 6th officer is Roland Claude, and he is charged with criminal damage to property. He was the officer who broke the window, the driver's side window of the vehicle driven by Messiah Young. And so those are the charges that we have asked the court to sign a warrant for. If you go to the next slide. You know, some people might ask, well, is this the first time that you guys have ever done this? this is not the first time that our office has asked that an officer is charged prior to indictment. We had two previous cases, one involving an Atlanta officer, James Burns, who was charged with a homicide. And Mr. Burns, the incident took place on the 22nd of June of 2016. And in that case, we received a video that accurately depicted what happened at the time of the crime. So the incident happened on the 22nd of June, and 25 days later, we asked that he be arrested. He was indicted on the 5th of September of 2018. So he was arrested, as in this case, prior to an indictment. We had a second case involving an East Point officer. The defendant's name was, I think, James Goodine. He was charged with an attempted rape. Our office, through the media, found out we found out on the 5th of August of 2018 that he had committed this crime. On the 31st of August, we asked that Mr. Goodine be arrested, and he was not indicted until the 22nd of November of 2019. So this is not the first time we have asked that an arrest warrant be issued prior to the time of the indictment. So we have asked the court in each one of these cases to set a bond at $10,000. We've asked that it be a signature bond, and there are two main reasons for this. Number one is we are still suffering from the effects of the virus, and we have been trying to limit the number of people in the Fulton County Jail. So also these are police officers, and we felt that a signature bond, because of those two circumstances, would be appropriate. The officers will, we've asked them to turn themselves in by the end of the day on Friday, and so that they can be processed through the Fulton County Jail. What we wanted to do now, I'm just assumed, but I've been, my staff has indicated to me that some of you have not seen the videos that we've been referring to. So we're going to play just one of the videos that gives you an opportunity to see many of the things that we have described. And hey, Milton, would you do me a favor? When we finish the video, then I wanted to ask them to come back here, because I can understand why they wouldn't want to watch it again. And Mr. and Mrs. Young, if you...
You're watching Channel 2 Action News at noon. If you're just joining us, I want to tell you what you're looking at right here. This is some of the body camera footage that we've just learned has resulted in criminal charges against 6 Atlanta police officers and former officers. This is all related to the violent confrontation with a couple of college kids, which happened Saturday night in downtown Atlanta. 2 of those officers were fired within the first 24 hours, and we've just learned that after reviewing the case, the DA Paul Howard is pursuing charges against 6 of them. Let's listen in as he explains what happened. Again, you're looking at some of that body camera footage. As you watch this video, this is the body camera video from an incident Saturday night in Atlanta. I just want to explain what we're looking at. It's unusual to see it played out like this. This is part of a press conference announcing charges against officers with DA Paul Howard. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Represents Mr. Young to come forward.
Good afternoon. I'm Mauli Davis with the Davis Bozeman Law Firm, and Chris Stewart, who represents Ms. Pilgrim, couldn't be with us today. He is in Minnesota fighting for justice there. And so we wanted to bring these young people down. We want in every opportunity for the world to see these fine young people who you just saw terrorized by Atlanta's finest. And we are very committed to work with the Stewart trial firm and our firm, working together to fight for justice for them. They have been traumatized by this experience, and that's why they asked if they could step out so that they did not have to watch themselves be brutalized by Atlanta Police Department. They are, their families are here. They come from, as we say, good stock. These are good young people who are doing good things, who have a bright future. And it is our hope and prayer that something that happens in the way of justice will not dampen the bright future that they have because of what they've experienced. And so we hope that this step is a first step in the right direction. Unfortunately, we have been here many, many times before where officers are arrested. And so we are prayerful, hopeful that this will go to its full conclusion and these officers will not only be arrested, indicted, and convicted, because what they did to our children, and these are our community children, they have to be held accountable for. And with that, I'd like Ms. Pilgrim to come up. She's a student at Spelman, and make a statement, followed by Mr. Messiah Young.
Hello. So what I would like to say is I'm so happy that they're being held accountable for their actions, because there wasn't one justifiable thing. There wasn't anything that there was nothing that could have been done to prevent something like that. Like, it was just ridiculous, and I'm happy they're finally being held accountable. And all I can say is I hope every police officer who thinks it's okay to drag someone, beat someone, do all this stuff because they're cops, I hope they're all gonna be held accountable as well. And be safe, everyone, please.
Sorry. Introduce yourself.
Greetings, my name is Messiah Young. I'd just like to express my brief, small satisfaction for what has happened, and just the sense that I feel a little safer now that these monsters are off of the street and no longer able to terrorize anyone else from this point on. So I think moving forward, we just need to, like Ms. Pilgrim said, we just need to make sure that all officers are held accountable and that there really is change moving forward within the culture of policing. Thank you.
I tell you, it's very difficult to watch that tape without being somewhat affected by it. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pass out copies of the charges. I think we've got about 25 of them. And I believe we're going to email the news agencies who we notified with copies as well. And if you don't think that we have your email address, I've got an employee, Chanel, if you would, and she will get your email address so we can make sure that you will get a copy of the charges that we have had issued today. And that's all that we have. And again, thank you all for being here very much. If you would pass it on. Yes.
What kind of prison or jail times do you expect these officers to serve?
Well, it's difficult to say. We have, in our experience, we have tried, I believe, in 2 different cases, officers for physically abusing suspects. In the first case, I believe the judge sentenced the defendant to 8 years. In our second case that we concluded about 3 months ago, the defendant decided to go ahead and enter a guilty plea. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in that case. So my expectation that if it is like the other cases that we presented with police officers, it will end up in that range.
Between 5 and 8 years?
In 8 years. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Howard, you mentioned that you saw a media clip. We know CBS 46 was live on air when this happened, and our angle showed this attack from the very front. Did you watch that, and did that help come to these charges?
That was very instrumental in moving forward with our charging decision, so we really want to thank you all for that.
You announced that the press conference is over and that if you guys need assistance with getting out, the investigators are out front.
Thank you all so much.
You've been listening to Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard announcing criminal charges against 6 APD officers and former officers. 2 of them were fired within 24 hours of a violent incident with 2 college students in a car in downtown Atlanta. The other 4 have now been, they're pursuing criminal charges against them, from damage to property to aggravated battery to aggravated assault. Fulton County is asking these officers to turn themselves in. They were also going through the body camera video, which just turns your stomach inside out to look at the terror in the face of that young woman who was sitting in the passenger seat. We're going to continue right now with Channel 2 Action News at noon.